This is Ashikai's The Missing Link in the Lore, a Genshin Impact Theory video. Let's get into it.
The stellar black body Ungien brought back to the Frost Moon might be one of the most interesting and important entities ever introduced in a world quest. And I'm not saying that because I think the stellar black body is one of those "this changes everything" kind of dealios, because it doesn't actually change anything. But what it does do is simplify our understandings of the connections between major world-building elements like Irminsul, the Firmament, Visions, and even the Abyss.
Okay. Honestly, this is a good video for me to watch because I feel like even though I played through the entire quest, I feel like I might have not understood the lore behind it. I got the very surface story. I understood that, but I feel like I could definitely have a deeper understanding of this lore. So let's get into that.
I think those connections are definitely worth talking about. But before we add Astra Abyssoscar our way into the lore, we need to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, Eneba. Now, if you're watching this Genshin Impact video, you probably play a gacha game or two. So it may behoove you to know that Eneba provides a safe and secure top-up service for all sorts of games.
We'll watch the sponsor here. I will probably cut it out for the video that I'm going to be posting on YouTube. But, you know, this is important for Ashikai as well. So let's support them.
You only need a UID to top up an account. That means you can surprise your friends with the gift of a monthly pass without ever needing to log into their account. I don't know about you, but asking my friends for their login information always ruins the surprise. And whether you're gifting yourself or your friends, Eneba is also the gift that keeps on giving because you earn cash back on every purchase, which you can then use to discount your next top up, or you can put it towards a shiny new game key. Eneba has a great selection of games that are up to 90% off, so you can snag a copy of Tales of Zestiria, Dark Souls Remastered, Hitman Contracts, Terraria, Tomb Raider,
yeah, honestly,
or even Peak for
even
$5.
outside of
you,
Genshin top-ups,
really great
Eneba
so
can be very
you're
good.
Looking for a convenient way to top up your account,
I haven't used it too much yet for some top-ups on Genshin, but
you should definitely use my link in the description box to check
I
out
might
Eneba.
have a little
You'll
look
be
for a
glad you
game
did.
key sometime.
Big thanks to Eneba for sponsoring this video, and now I think it's time we finally
All
talk
right,
about this
let's go.
mysterious stellar black body we found on the moon and why it's important to several key features of Teyvat. And of course, as always, we will start things off by talking about everything we actually know for sure so far. The stellar black body is an information-based life form that was found by the dragon researcher Ungien while he was tracking down a signal it was emitting from somewhere in the depths of space. After discovering the stellar black body, Ungien decided to fuse with it before returning to the Frost Moon, presumably so he could overcome the language barrier between them, which would allow the other dragons to understand the stellar black body's message. This decision effectively led to Ungien's death, but it also resulted in the creation of a brand new life form that was neither Ungien nor the stellar black body. This new entity was a round, black creature covered in spikes with an iridescent sheen that emitted filament-like ejecta from its main body. And at some point prior to their return to
I love the little image there. I love it. It's beautiful. I think it's a great little illustration. That's about what I thought it looks like, to be fair, so...
filament-like ejecta from its main body. And at some point prior to their return to the Frost Moon, whatever substance this life form was made of coated the exterior of the spaceship, rendering said ship nearly undetectable. After the other dragons recovered the Ungien black body...
Oh, I didn't quite get that during the story, I guess. That is interesting. It covered the whole spaceship, making it pretty much impossible to see. Oh.
Ship nearly undetectable. After the other dragons recovered...
Oh, was that what? Yeah, wasn't that what was connected to the false sky? I think I got that. Yeah, no, okay.
The Ungien black body entity from the spaceship and successfully received and decoded its message, they began researching the mysterious properties of this bizarre new life form. And that led to the development of two very distinct and very important projects. Project Lunar Veil and McGee's Getty's unnamed Genesis project. Project Lunar Veil sought to utilize the apparent cloaking properties of the stellar black body. To do this, researchers like Lucilim spliced the genetic data of the stellar black body with that of the moonshade trees, then stimulated those trees with Archeolune energy until the tree began to expel black body matter from its branches, forming a thin visual barrier that rendered anything beneath it nearly invisible to the outside. Generally speaking, the dragon researchers believed this invisibility cloak, so to speak, could hide the moon and potentially Teyvat from being spotted by unknown hostile entities in the depths of space. But as they were building out the means to generate a lunar veil big enough to cover the entire moon, the Heavenly Principle's spaceship crash-landed in Lucilim's laboratory, causing the lunar veil generator to explode. The dissipated stellar blackbody and Archeolune energy formed a massive lunar sea, which later became the seedbed for all life forms on the moon.
Oh, that's how the lunar sea was created. Okay. This little recap is nice because I feel like I might have forgotten a few things there.
But more on that later. Now, the results of Project Lunar Veil were later surrendered to the invading Heavenly Principles, who appears to have used it to create the false sky firmament that surrounds Teyvat. Not just because the firmament and the Lunar Veil have a lot in common, but also because it was always the intention for Project Lunar Veil to be scaled up enough to cover the entire planet, so this progression of events just makes sense. But we'll talk about that more later as well. Now, the other Stellar Blackbody project never got an official name as far as I know, so I've dubbed it the Genesis Project on account of it exploring the stellar blackbody's biology. This project was led by Ungian's partner, Magis Getty, and her research into the blackbody's genetic information was actually used in Project Lunar Veil as the means to modify the moonshade trees. But her research and motivation for it went a lot deeper than just Project Lunar Veil. Magis Getty was actually Ungian's partner, or lover, and she was trying to find a way to separate Ungian from the blackbody matter. But once she realized she couldn't separate her partner from the blackbody, she began attempting to accelerate or alter the fusion process instead, even going so far as to feed her own body to this Ungian blackbody fusion entity.
That was freaking crazy. Yeah, I think I was a little bit more focused on that story than exactly the link of the cloaking properties of the stellar blackbody to the lunar veil and the false sky.
So far as to feed her own body to this Ungian blackbody fusion entity. Her experiments resulted in the creation of a new type of life form that was born of both stellar blackbody matter and Archeolune energy, with a capacity for near-endless reincarnation. These life forms are the original Kuhenki. Eventually, Magis Getty became a part of her own experiment so that she could live alongside her reborn Kuhenki partner. Over time, the Lunar Sea actually became the perfect place for these new blackbody Archeolune energies to rebirth themselves, which turned the Lunar Sea into something akin to Teyvat's primordial sea. Now
I guess that makes sense, yeah. If the stellar blackbody and the Archeolune energy created the Kuhenki and the Lunar Sea was also created out of both, that makes sense that is the place for them to be.
We're going to go over all the ramifications of these discoveries momentarily, but before we do that, we have to talk about what a real stellar blackbody is, because it is a real concept in physics, and Hoyo's choice to reference it here is both important and fascinating in a lot of ways.
Prepare for more science. Let's go.
So in physics, a black body is a physical entity that absorbs all electromagnetic radiation while simultaneously emitting black body radiation in the form of thermal energy or heat and light. And by absorb, I mean the black body doesn't reflect any electromagnetic radiation. And because a black body absorbs all electromagnetic radiation, a true black body has natural camouflage against certain types of sensors like radar. Because radar utilizes electromagnetic radiation. Now a black body can
and it doesn't emit any electromagnetic radiation, but black body radiation. Okay, yeah. Understand that so far. I feel like this little science lesson is going to be a little bit more advanced. I'm going to have to pay attention.
take on a lot of different forms. Planets, black holes, stars, and even the cosmic microwave background radiation that's left over from the Big Bang are all considered types of black bodies. Although it is worth noting that a perfect black body is extremely rare. And these examples are not true black bodies. But despite not being true black bodies, they still fit the criteria well enough to bear the name of black body. So just know that there is some nuance here, but I am going to be referring to them all as black bodies from here on out. Now, of these black body examples, the star best matches the stellar black body Ungian fused with. partly because it's being referenced by name here. Interestingly, stars are as close to a perfect black body as we can practically get, because they absorb nearly all electromagnetic radiation while also emitting heat and light. And the more electromagnetic energy you stimulate a star with, the brighter and hotter it gets.
Oh.
This behavior is very similar to what the dragons did when they stimulated the stellar black body with archeolune energy. Archeolune energy is, after all, a type of electromagnetic radiation in the Genshin universe.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, yeah. Electromagnetic storm, Archeolunus storm. Yep.
It's light realm energy. Now, for the purposes of this video, I want you to think of stars as if they have two parts. There's the star's black body, which absorbs electromagnetic radiation, which we cannot see, and the star's emitted black body radiation, which we can see because it contains visible light. The black body radiation of a star is generally what we refer to whenever we talk about the color of a star, hence why we describe stars like the sun as yellow or white. But the black body aspect of a star isn't visible because it absorbs visible light, making it far closer in color conceptually to black than it is to white. So colloquially, the part of the star we can perceive with our eyes is made of light, while the part of the star we can't perceive with our eyes is made up of darkness.
Oh my god. Okay. Let me scroll back on that a little bit. I need to hear that again to completely understand it, I think.
Parts. There's the star's black body, which absorbs electromagnetic radiation, which we cannot see, and the star's emitted black body radiation, which we can see because it contains visible light. The black body radiation of a star is generally what we refer to whenever we talk about the color of a star, hence why we describe stars like the sun as yellow or white. But the black body aspect of a star isn't visible because it absorbs visible light, making it far closer in color conceptually to black than it is to white. So colloquially, the part of the star we can perceive with our eyes is made of light, while the part of the star we can't perceive with our eyes is made up of darkness. Now, I'm putting an emphasis on the unscientific nature of this simplification here because we're gonna get a little bit philosophical and pseudoscience-y for the rest of this video, and I want to make that distinction. Okay. Now, this idea that a star is made up of both light and dark is something that I overlooked for a very long time, in spite of all of the hints littered throughout the game. You know, like when the Melazines said that the sun is actually black. But it wasn't until I was exploring Ungian's spaceship and read his log that I realized why the color of the sun was actually relevant. Before Ungian completely fused with the stellar blackbody, he left behind a log where he called the stellar blackbody the soul of a star. And that was the line that kind of made everything click for me. Because if we take that statement literally, a lot of things start to make sense. For example, why is Deshret a black star? Well, we know that at one point he severed his soul from his body. And since Apep ate his body, this black star that she didn't eat might just be a manifestation of Deshret's soul. Which means that Deshret's soul is akin to a stellar black body. But before you brace yourself for Deshret glazing, I don't actually think his soul is unique in this regard. I actually think it's quite possible that all souls in Teyvat are technically stellar black bodies. Or to put it another way, I think Genshin is operating under the assumption that a person is akin to a star.
A person is akin to a star, and then their soul is the black body. Okay.
With their soul being the stellar black body and their body being its black body radiation. Now, I recognize that this sounds like a bit of a wild assumption at first, so just suspend your disbelief for a little bit and hear me out. During Cinderella's, I guess I'll call it story quest, she talks about how mechanical life forms like puppets desire a heart. But a heart is also a soul, and both can be converted into pure information and thus preserved. This reminds me a lot of how the stellar blackbody was described as an information-based life form as well as the soul of a star. A bit of a bold leap, I know, but you remember how the Melazines said that the sun was actually black? Well, this could be an indicator that Melazines actually see the shape of one's soul rather than their physical shape.
Interesting.
In other words, they don't see using the same visible light spectrum as humans do.
Oh yeah, what the Melazine says here, to my eyes, Paimon is just like a little rainbow balloon floating in the air. It's still so cute, that description. Okay.
Now, before I go into the ramifications of this assumption, I do have some evidence to back up the claim that people are stars. And it all has to do with Project Lunar Veil and Teyvat's Firmament. As you may recall, researchers on the moon
I kind of believe it without the evidence, but I would like to hear it anyways.
Project Lunar Veil and Tevat's Firmament. As you may recall, researchers on the moon spliced the genetic information of Ungian's stellar blackbody with that of the moonshade tree, which then emitted blackbody radiation dubbed the lunar veil when stimulated by archeolune energy.
Okay,
Now,
yeah.
if stellar blackbodies are souls, then the lunar veil is technically made from mixing souls with light realm energy. Now, we know that researchers
Oh.
Lucilim eventually gave the data from the Lunar Veil project to the Heavenly Principles,
Yeah.
who then, presumably, used it to modify Irminsul similarly to how Lucilim modified the moonshade trees. This would cause Irminsul to emit an
Oh,
advanced
okay.
version of the lunar veil, which we call the firmament. But
Oh, it does make a lot of sense. Irminsul is supporting the firmament?
similarly to how Lucilim modified the moonshade trees. This would cause Irminsul to emit an advanced version of the lunar veil, which we call the
Oh.
firmament. But for Irminsul to emit a lunar veil, it would need both light realm energy and stellar blackbody matter.
Mhm.
Light realm energy is obviously supplied by the elemental energy flowing within the ley lines, but
Yup.
based on our current assumptions, stellar blackbody matter would need to be provided by souls. Interestingly, during the early days of the Heavenly Principles' reign, the souls of humans used to get shuttled to the moon. And I think this may have been because the Heavenly Principles was using those souls to develop the advanced lunar veil technology that eventually became the firmament. Because after the
Oh,
War of
okay.
Funerary Flame, souls stopped going to the moon and instead went to Irminsul. Timing-wise, I
Yeah.
think this makes sense because the Heavenly Principles and the Dragon researchers intended for the Lunar Veil and the Firmament to protect Tevat and its moons from the Abyss. And it was
Oh
during the
my
War of Funerary
God.
Flame when Nibelung returned with the Abyss. But we will talk more about the significance of that event a little bit later. It
Okay.
just makes sense for them to try and activate Irminsul's Firmament right when the Abyss appears. So basically, souls got moved into Irminsul after the war, which
Mhm.
means that Irminsul now had to ingest a blend of both light realm energy in the form of the elements and souls in the form of
I never really made that connection. I don't know if we were supposed to, but I didn't. And I'm so glad it's like explained in detail here, basically. Yeah, no, I wouldn't have put that together myself.
souls got moved into Irminsul after the war, which means that Irminsul now had to ingest a blend of both light realm energy in the form of the elements and souls in the form of information or memories in order to
Mhm.
create that firmament. And we've known since the very beginning of the game that Irminsul does in fact ingest massive quantities of both elemental energy and memories.
Yeah.
But we've never really understood why until now. Now, I've been pitching the idea that Irminsul's branches make up the false sky firmament since year one, and boy do I feel
Whoa.
validated because I also said that the Irminsul fruits hanging on those branches are also the stars in the sky. And I based that idea on the
Oh.
Unreconciled Stars event where a star containing Leonard's memories fell to Tevat.
Unreconciled Stars event? Goddamn. That's been a long-standing theory then. Jesus, that's so long ago.
Idea on the Unreconciled Stars event where a star containing Leonard's memories fell to Tevat from the false sky. And now that we know that memories can be likened to a soul, and that the star that fell from the sky contained memories, we can now say with confidence that the stars in Tevat's sky are in fact souls. And you know, this idea that memories are souls, or
Yeah,
at least like
okay.
your soul is comprised of memories, is probably the reason why the Aranara say death is simply a one-time loss of
Mhm.
memories.
Yeah,
When your soul
that
leaves
makes
your
sense
body,
too.
you die. That said, I do wonder if the firmament initially used angels for this purpose, since they were collectively known as the Dawn Stars, and as seen in Nicole's trailer, they fell to Earth during the War of Funerary Flame. But I
Oh, so before the war, before the souls were used, like we're going into the Irminsul after somebody died, they were going to the moon, and the angels might have been the carriers of them from Tevat to the moon. Is that what I'm understanding?
you die. That said, I do wonder if the firmament initially used angels for this purpose, since they were collectively known as the Dawn Stars, and as seen in Nicole's trailer, they fell to Earth during the War of Funerary Flame. But I can't prove
Maybe the angels were the memories themselves or still the carriers of the memories, but just stars. But I guess that's a theory. It's not necessarily a theory that has a lot of evidence behind it.
Purpose, since
Okay.
they were collectively known as the Dawn Stars, and as seen in Nicole's trailer, they fell to Earth during the War of Funerary Flame.
Mhm.
But I can't prove or refute that,
Oh.
so I'm going to ignore it. But what I will not ignore is the fact that we have actually seen a real soul-based firmament before. Well, we saw the plan for one. Remember Malwika's backup plan to fight against the Abyss? In the event that everything went wrong, she was planning to take all of the memories stored within the Night Kingdom and weave them into a giant net-like barrier that would protect Natlan from the Abyss. In the context of a soul
true.
being made of information and memories, Malwika was literally making a miniature replica of the firmament. And there is yet another reference to a false sky or wall-like barrier around the world made of people that's found in an even weirder location than Natlan's Archon quest. It's in this Romurian book called the Anecdota Septentrionalis. It's kind of a twist on some Greek epics like the Iliad and the Odyssey, but there's one scene in this book where the Romurians are sailing to the end of the world. But when they get there, they find a giant wall at the end of the world that's made from hanging people. And
What the fuck? I must have missed that book because Jesus Christ, that sounds kind of terrifying. Malwika's version sounded a lot less horrible than that. A wall of hanging people. Ugh.
a giant wall at the end of the world that's made from hanging people. And I am pretty darn sure that this is a reference to the firmament.
That makes
that
sense.
said, I don't actually think the Heavenly Principles uses the souls of just anyone in the false sky. Especially if we consider the possibility that angels originally took on the roles of those stars. Instead, I think they're using the souls of very specific people, namely Allergenes. I found Nicole's vision story to be rather infuriating when I first read it because she knows the reason why the Heavenly Principles hands out visions and she refuses to elaborate.
God damn it, Nicole. God damn it. Why can't you just tell us? That is actually really annoying, but I mean, gotta keep it for the big reveal. Can't just put it in the voice lines, right? I guess.
Knows the reason why the Heavenly Principles hands out visions and she refuses to elaborate. And to make matters even more confusing, she actively tried to get a vision for ages and ages until it finally appeared. And I couldn't for the life of me understand why she was so desperate to have a vision, especially when we have people like Renee de Petrichor talking about how visions are a bad thing because they tie you to the fate of the world, and how even Nicole recognized how a vision would lead to an, quote, inevitable ending, which, I don't know about you, but it sounds pretty ominous to me. But if the firmament is made of souls, then Nicole's quest for a vision and Renee's aversion to them makes sense, because it means that the souls of the Allergenes are used to power the firmament. Nicole would find it a great honor to be one of the people chosen to protect the planet, whereas Renee kind of wants to protect the planet his own way. Now, the argument that Allergenes are the ones who are chosen to power the firmament actually starts with Venti, because Venti describes visions as a more primitive form of a gnosis. And based on everything we've gone over so far, that would actually make visions a physical manifestation of one's soul. See, the term gnosis means knowledge, like the true knowledge of the soul. It's something akin to enlightenment. But even that kind of knowledge is technically just information, right? And we've already established that information is akin to the soul, or at least the soul is composed of information.
Yeah? Oh my God.
And we also know that a soul is a heart. It's the core of your being.
Okay,
and that matters because in Chinese, the gnosis is called the heart of God. And I think that's because it literally is one. Based on everything we've talked about so far, the 7 gnoses appear to be 7 pieces of the third descender's soul. It's the third descender's stellar black body matter. Now, descenders are obviously on a different level when compared to a regular human, so it makes sense to call visions primitive versions of a gnosis. because a Gnosis would be the soul of like a god, aka a descender, whereas
Yeah.
a vision would be the soul of a regular human being.
Yeah.
And that's why I said visions are the physical manifestation of an Allergene's soul. Interestingly, the message left behind by the stellar blackbody on the moon describes a race of people that had some kind of non-corporeal external organ. Now, at the start of the game, Venti actually does describe visions as external foci or external organs. And I'm not saying that the stellar blackbody on the moon was specifically referring to visions as an external organ, but to quote Hoyo's own words, when coincidences start piling up, they cease to be coincidences.
I was just thinking, honestly, I don't know if I would want a vision anymore after learning of that, because I feel like I would like my soul to be inside my body, not necessarily an external piece of my body that someone can take away. Yeah. I mean, obviously, a lot of people don't know because a lot of the characters that we know of have been wanting a vision, right? But they've been wanting a vision in the sense of like wanting that power, wanting the recognition of their god, basically. But maybe if they would know, they would think about it differently.
Own words, when coincidences start piling up, they cease to be coincidences. So the way I see it, the heavenly principles appears to be forging the stars of the false sky from the souls of humanity. And those stars are then harvested and hung in the sky. This forging process seems to involve having an archon grant a person a fragment of their elemental mastery. This feels very similar to how you stimulate a black body with electromagnetic radiation in order to get it to glow, so to speak. And that glow is emitted by the vision in the form of elemental energy or light realm power.
Okay, yeah.
This might mean that the label of vision or eye of God actually stems from a 5th century theory that eyes actually emitted light. And it also might be a reference to the idiom, eyes are the window to the soul. On a more explicit note, in the Genshin manga, visions did originally have stars inside of them. Perhaps Hoyo removed them from the game later on because they felt it would be a bit too on the nose to leave it in. But this is where things get really interesting, because we also know that Irminsul was part of the fate system that the heavenly principles implemented. And I think the reason why that system was put into place was to ensure that the firmament remained fully operational at all times. And for that to happen, it would need a steady supply of souls or allergenes. And if that system were ever to fail or stutter, then the firmament would falter, leaving Teyvat visible and vulnerable to the thing the heavenly principles seems to fear the most, the Dark Destroyer, which is probably the Abyss.
Yeah.
I feel like we've always had a pretty good sense of what the Abyss is capable of, but I don't think we've ever really been able to pin down what the Abyss actually is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really help that the Abyss is both a force and a location either, so I'm just going to focus on the Abyss as a force for now, and we'll circle back to the location aspect of it a bit later.
Okay.
Now, as a force, I've personally been of the opinion that the Abyss is effectively the prima materia, or the primordial chaos, a sort of raw base material that's used to create reality. And I think that theory held up pretty well until Alice shared Barbeloth's theory, which claimed that the Abyss was actually a manifestation of the resentment of all unchosen fates. And I thought this was a really weird way to describe the Abyss, because the fate system is unique to Teyvat, but the Abyss is not. The Abyss definitely does exist elsewhere in space, and Skirk can attest to that. And by her own testimony, she refutes the idea that the Abyss is resentful at all. She calls it a force of nature, just like any other. It's neither good nor bad. A force.
I guess that would fit into the theory of it being the entity created by all the unchosen fates. That wouldn't be like an evil force, but more of a force of nature, like was mentioned.
She calls it a force of nature, just like any other. It's neither good nor bad. A forest fire doesn't burn out of malice, after all. So in her view, the Abyss doesn't have any intent either. Now, I've made multiple attempts at reconciling these discrepancies with varying degrees of success, but I am now convinced that there actually are no discrepancies, and that all these things are true simultaneously, and the existence of the stellar blackbody might be able to prove it.
Oh my god.
If we run with the idea that the stellar blackbody
Oh my god, not the little drawing. It's so cute.
is the soul of a star, then we need to look at the Gnosis again, because the Gnosis should be the soul of the third descender that's split into 7 pieces.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that the Gnosis also brings calamities, hence why the Heavenly Principles is called the Lord of the 7 Calamities. Skirk also has a very...
Sorry. Oh, is it? That's news to me. Or again, something I've forgotten, which is why we're watching these. let me listen to that again.
It's important to note that the Gnosis also brings calamities, hence why the Heavenly Principles is called the Lord of the 7 Calamities. Skirk also has a very interesting comment about the Gnosis. She calls them objects of misfortune and disaster, and then she says, quote, "To live is
that sounds
in
like a
itself
calamity.
blessing, but once a person dies, the bonds he once had with this world shall turn to curses." And what I think...
Oh, we keep hearing kind of references to curses, right? During the trailer now as well. Curses were also mentioned by what probably was Vojanitsa, I think.
Disaster. And then she says, quote, "To live is in itself a blessing, but once a person dies, the bonds he once had with this world shall turn to curses." And what I think she meant is that the Gnosis containing the soul of the third descender is actually full of the third descender's resentment. That's the source of the calamities.
Okay.
But that would actually mean that the abyss is inside the 7 Gnosis, which I know at first blush doesn't make any sense.
What?
But this interpretation is actually backed up by Sandrone's story quest, wherein she describes the fractured, unused souls left over from the Narcissenkreuz experiments as full of resentment. And those resentful souls fuse together to make a tulpa.
Now that is an interesting theory. Oh, I don't know what to think about that.
Fractured, unused souls left over from the Narcissenkreuz experiments as full of resentment. And those resentful souls fuse together to make a tulpa. We'll address this tulpa thing later, but if souls are the source of resentment because they are not chosen, then the abyss must be just a bunch of broken, unchosen souls.
I got a little ahead of myself, so that's how those are connected. Still, like, unchosen fates, unchosen souls. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I got that. It's a lot for my brain.
Right? But then that would imply that the abyss is just volatile stellar blackbody matter. So blackbody matter that's in an agitated or unstable state. But that wouldn't make any sense, would it? After all, there's stellar blackbody matter on the moon. And it's explicitly stated a couple of times that there is no abyssal presence on the moon.
True.
Or is there? In the message where Ungin called the stellar blackbody the soul of a star, he also said that that star had been, quote, swallowed by the darkness. And this darkness is heavily implied to be the abyss, which again is confusing because there is no detectable abyssal presence on the moon. And yet, Ungin brought this stellar blackbody matter that had been swallowed by the darkness back to the moon. So there should, by all accounts, be abyssal presences on the moon. But since there isn't, that means either Ungin somehow purged the abyss from the blackbody by fusing with it, or the stellar blackbody itself was becoming the abyss because it was falling into despair. And suddenly things make sense, right? When it's in a stable state, a stellar blackbody is a benign entity.
Yeah.
It's a natural force of nature. It's a soul. But when it falls into despair, when it becomes volatile or angry or hostile or resentful, it warps and mutates until it becomes the force that we call the abyss. And that's why there's no abyssal presence on the moon. If you
but how would that connect back to the Gnosis having the abyss inside them, possibly, and then Skirk mentioning that the Gnosis were like, what was it again? Skirk said that the Gnosis were connected to the calamities, but that they're like more as in a force of nature. Oh no, the abyss was more so a force of nature. My brain's not made for this, but I'm really trying hard to understand. Let me scroll back a little bit.
Resentful, it warps and mutates until it becomes the force that we call the abyss. And that's why there's no abyssal presence on the moon. If you still don't believe me.
So, pieces of the stellar blackbody are the Gnosis, and they might have grown resentful, which have then turned into the abyss. But then Skirk did say that the abyss isn't necessarily an evil force, but more so a force of nature. That one, I feel like maybe doesn't make as much sense. I mean, in my opinion, but that's just like I said, that's maybe just my perspective. If resentment is added, it becomes an evil force. But that might not be the right understanding here.
It warps and mutates until it becomes the force that we call the abyss. And that's why there's no abyssal presence on the moon. If you still don't believe me, I want you to think about Gosoithoth for a minute. You know, the manifestation of the abyss that we fought in Natlan. Do you think it's a coincidence that Gosoithoth perfectly matches the physical description of the stellar black body matter on the moon? I mean, they're both round, black, and spiked entities with filament-like ejecta. As I said earlier, when the coincidences start piling up, they cease to be coincidences.
Yeah.
But that said, this is still just an assumption. But it's under this assumption that a bunch of things start making a lot more sense, right? Like, obviously, this idea backs up Barbaloth's resentment theory, but it also works with the idea that the abyss is like the primordial chaos from which life is born.
Okay,
because the stellar black body matter was a catalyst for the creation of new life on the frost moon. So if we consider stellar black body matter to be an inert, stable form of the abyss, then the abyss is also a catalyst for the creation of new life.
Okay. So, what I get from here is that the stellar black body is the abyss, but then when it turns resentful, it becomes like the evil form of the abyss that we know in Tevat. There being no presence of the abyss on the moon isn't necessarily that there's no abyss on the moon, but there's just no evil abyss on the moon. But there was a presence of the abyss in the form of just the stellar black body, not the actual, like, stellar black body with resentment.
Then the abyss is also a catalyst for the creation of new life. And we have evidence for that as well. See, everything in Tevat is made of light realm energy, so anything physical is composed of the elements since elemental energy is light realm energy. So if something wants to exist on the physical plane, it's gonna need a body that's made from light. So in the same way, a stellar black body needs to ingest electromagnetic radiation in order to emit black body radiation, aka light. A human soul, for example, would need to consume a lot of elemental energy so that the soul could emit enough light to create a physical form.
Okay.
In other words, someone's shape or their body is something that's emanated from their soul. And this is likely the reason why the stellar black body on the frost moon was said to thirst for the bodies of the dragons, because those were made of light as well. The stellar black body wanted to be born into the physical plane, and the
what was that? What happened there?
Well. The stellar black body wanted to be born into the of the dragons, because those were made of light as well. The stellar black body wanted to be born into the physical plane, and the abyss exhibits a similar behavior. We often see the abyss rearrange itself into shapes that mirror living beings, and I'm of the opinion that the abyss does this because it's uncreated material that wants to be created. So as the abyss destroys things and consumes everything that's made of light, it's effectively trying to stimulate itself with electromagnetic energy so that it can eventually emit black body radiation and thus create a physical form. It is trying to give birth to itself.
Though I already feel like Abyss already has kind of a physical form. I know it's not exactly the same physical form as, like, we know in Tevat, but obviously we can see it. Maybe it's a case of, indeed, we can still see it in the way it is now with, like, the purple form because it has consumed some light, but not enough to get a full physical body like the creatures in Tevat,
You can kind of think of this process like the abyss is a sentient pool of water that's swallowing up granules of sand, thinking that there will eventually be enough sand to form a container that will hold all the water. But the water lacks the ability to properly shape the sand into a vessel, and all the sand granules end up getting lost in the water instead. Now, tulpas, like the ones found in Sandrone's quest, also mimic this same behavior. The tulpa in that quest was made up of all of the souls discarded by the Narcissenkreuz Ordo that had merged together, and they had somehow collectively managed to accumulate enough hydro energy to cobble together an unstable physical form. That's what the abyss is doing. That's probably what the stellar black body was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing about tulpas is that they're technically thought forms or astral projections, which is exactly what it sounds like. They're thoughts given forms. And both in-game and in occultism, tulpas also go by the name of egregores, and you can think of these as more specific types of thought forms. They're like collective entities or collective consciousnesses, or hive minds if you prefer.
Okay.
Now, tulpas and egregores can become real beings if and when the right conditions are met. And the description for the hydrotulpa even says as much, claiming that a tulpa is made of countless wills that are dissolved in water, which, like the universe, was full of souls that wished to be born. Isn't that what I just said about the abyss? That it's a mass of souls that wants to be born into the world? That means by this definition that the abyss is also a type of tulpa or egregore. It's a thought form that wants to become real. It's just like a stellar black body.
So it is kind of like how what Ashikai talked about before, with the lunar sea being very similar to the primordial sea, and then these creatures being formed from the primordial sea with like the resentment of these of like the separate people, separate entities, them being combined and creating this tulpa. That's how the abyss creatures are also being created from combination of stellar black bodies and electromagnetic energy.
Just an angry stellar black body.
Yeah.
And if that's true, then the location that we refer to as the abyss should be a cognitive realm or a thought space. Not too dissimilar to that of the Night Kingdom. Because like it was in the Night Kingdom where we learned about how thoughts can become things and how things can be encoded as thoughts. And all this leads me to conclude that the soul is also technically the mind, but not the brain, making the abyss a very angry hive mind that's technically just lacking leadership. And
it's so much information. It's like, obviously it's not all complete information because these are theories. I feel like I struggle to understand these as theories that don't have complete evidence behind them and separate that from like actual information, you know. I feel like I'm missing something, but that's the point of theories. They're not completely proven, so they are missing some evidence. So I just have to adjust my mind to that.
Making the abyss a very angry hive mind that's technically just lacking leadership. And in that context, forbidden knowledge becomes a sort of collective knowledge that's shared by the souls that form the abyss. And it makes perfect sense to me why exposure to all of this would drive someone mad. I mean, that's a lot of information, memories, and emotions being poured into a vessel that's not meant to process all of that. And I'm not trying to change the subject abruptly, but it was at this moment when I was writing this that I realized Voyager also split her mind from her body, kind of like Deshret. And it was only her mind, or her soul, I guess, that entered Teyvat and also possessed a vessel made of light while her real body was on some other planet. Now, I know Voyager isn't confirmed to be a descender, and I'm not going to try and argue that she is, but I do think the idea of her being a stellar black body astral projection type entity to be very interesting in the context of descenders, because the first descender, the Heavenly Principles, is called a primordial human, and during the Temple of Space quest we learned about the myth of the primordial human. Allegedly, they were born when the powers of light and dark mixed. Based on everything I've laid out today, that suggests that the Heavenly Principles is likely composed of both a light-based vessel and a stellar black body soul or core. And if I'm right about the third descender soul being...
So they're just like us, as in the people in Teyvat. They also have a soul and a body. That'd be interesting.
Stellar black body soul or core. And if I'm right about the third descender soul being split into the 7 Gnosis, then they too would have been a vessel full of light with a black body soul, right? And if that's true, then we should really pay attention to the fact that the Traveler, the 4th descender, has the ability to slurp up a near infinite amount of abyssal energy. That suggests that they have the ability to contain a near infinite amount of souls in their body. And I think that includes the souls of other descenders, hence why the Gnosis was able to enter their body. And technically speaking, this ability of becoming a vessel that can house a near infinite amount of souls would make make the Traveler and thus all Descenders Tulpas, a thought given real form but also a
What?
collective consciousness, which is fascinating because when Renee
It
tried to make
is.
himself into a Descender, he also turned himself into a Tulpa, a vessel for countless souls.
Oh my
And I would be
God.
remiss not to mention the fact that Renee once said that a Descender needed to have the will to rival that of a world. But I'm starting to think that what he meant by that was that a Descender must possess a will powerful enough to maintain their sense of self and control even when their vessel contains enough souls to make up an entire world.
And that is what the Traveler is. Huh.
And that's a really interesting concept because right now, Nibelung is actually a viable candidate for the title of second Descender. And I've been wondering if he actually split his soul from his body and astral projected into space like Voyager did. If so, then it would make sense why he appeared black when he returned. His returning form would have just been his soul, his stellar black body. And
That's interesting. I don't know enough about the Voyager to really theorize or like understand exactly what they're talking about. It is interesting theory where Nibelung might be an entity who also split their soul from their body, and then the way they returned in their black form was just the stellar black body, which then might have been corrupted by resentment and then formed like the evil Nibelung.
his returning form would have just been his soul, his stellar black body. And if he was unable to return to his original vessel for whatever reason, it would make sense if he became so enraged at this fact that he drove himself mad.
Yes.
But it would also mean that Nibelung didn't bring the Abyss back with him from space. He actually became the Abyss. And that concludes all my thoughts on how the stellar black body connects a bunch of Genshin's world-building dots.
Whoa.
Okay, maybe that's not all my thoughts. But we're also near the end of the
I feel like Ashikai never stops thinking about Genshin Impact. I'm already happy with this amount and that I'm able to understand it up to this level.
Came the Abyss. And that concludes all my thoughts on how the stellar black body connects a bunch of Genshin's world-building dots. Okay, maybe that's not all my thoughts. But we're also near the end of the video, and I don't really have like a super solid conclusion for this video. I really just wanted to connect a bunch of dots because I thought the connections themselves were the most interesting thing that I took away from this moon quest. And there are a lot more connections I could make, but I'm only going to list off a few others in no real particular order. First off, I want to note that the events on the moon are actually very reminiscent of the story in Men of Lithin. The cognitive...
Oh God. I bet these are the ones that I'm not going to be understanding. That's fine. We'll still listen to them.
Events on the moon are actually very reminiscent of the story in Men of Lithin. The cognitive hazard, for example, that New Ur created is very similar to the fog of ignorance in the book, and the idea of turning life forms into information-based Lithin is very similar to both phlogistonization and the work of Magi's Getty on the moon. And the process of phlogistonization and converting people into stellar blackbody matter was actually compared literally and explicitly on the moon in some readables. I thought that was actually really cool. I didn't expect the book to come up again, and now I'm thinking it's probably going to come up at least one more time in the near future. It also occurred to me when I was writing the last part of this theory that technically speaking, Ungian is also a primordial human equivalent for the Kuhenki, because you know, he was the first Kuhenki to be born of light and darkness.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
A primordial Kuhenki born of Archeolune and stellar blackbody matter. And what I find super funny about this is that the Kuhenki are actually lunar melazines. Not only are they both bunnies, moon bunnies and sea bunnies respectively, but both species were born when light realm energy came into contact with abyssal energy.
Like the primordial sea and the lunar sea. Oh. Makes sense.
Species were born when light realm energy came into contact with abyssal energy, or rather, stellar blackbody matter. Now that I think about it, I think the same is true of the Kuhenki and Nodcry. Like, we know that Columbina was born from a pool of primordial seawater, but the timing of her birth actually suggests that the flood of abyssal energy that was released during the Conrian Cataclysm might have actually triggered the conditions for her birth. Stellar blackbody matter collided with light realm energy. And then she made moon spirit rabbits from her own body. I don't know, I just thought that was neat. But I think that's enough for now. So I'm gonna leave the rest of this connect the dot puzzle to you guys.
I think that's a great idea.
Go, have fun, be free. And with Snezhnaya just around the corner, maybe this theory will live on in perpetuity and maybe it will get refuted almost instantly. I don't know, we'll see. It's very possible that stellar black body matter is just not important at all and I've just made a bunch of really unnecessary connections.
I don't believe that.
I just want to say thank you to all my channel members for supporting my nonsense. You guys are amazing, so thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. I've got more theories in the oven, so stay tuned for the next one.
Oh my god. I'm glad I understood this one because I feel like I don't think it's not gonna matter for Snezhnaya. I think it is very much gonna relate to what we're gonna learn in Snezhnaya about all the lore as well. So I am excited for that. Oh, I can't believe we're so close already. But yeah, that was indeed Ashikai's video, The Missing Link in the Lore, a Genshin Impact Theory. So thanks for watching that with me.